If at all Pakistan breaks apart, it is going to be through the water issues and not through anything else.
Exactly, problem क्या है Indus Waters Treaty का?
The basin was one, but then we partitioned.
Then why did we give 80% of that water to Pakistan?
If you look at the factual details of the treaty, there is no mention actually of the 80-20. हमारे साइड में rivers के headworks थे, but less irrigated land था. वहाँ पे headworks नहीं थे, but they were more irrigated land. And therefore the negotiation then at that stage became eastern rivers. That means Sutlej, Ravi and Beas. Eastern rivers का flow was about 32 to 33 million acre feet of water annually. Western rivers का flow कितना था? About 135 million acre feet of water. On the western rivers, we said Pakistan can have 100% of the flow of water after India uses some of the provisions. Prime Minister Nehru's objective, we know, was principally to come to some sort of peaceful coexistence with Pakistan. By signing this treaty, there would be some peaceful coexistence. Nehru's vision of peaceful coexistence failed.
When we put the treaty on abeyance. So how did that happen when there is a no exit clause versus now we have it on abeyance?
But I think Pahalgam tilted the whole impression, as you know. And I think the treaty has now become an instrument of action for India. And I think in abeyance, what has happened is India has got unilateral right to do what it wants. And therefore, I think this abeyance will last for another 10 to 12 years. India is in no hurry. I mean, you can say that the treaty is in coma. And this coma will go on for a long time.
Provided we build the infrastructure which is needed.
So that is the objective as well.
Pakistan is again facing water crisis. And if I'm not mistaken, it has gone from 5,000 to 1,000 cubic meters per capita. What are the reasons behind this?
Pakistan is all about Punjab centric. The irrigated waters first go to the Punjabi fields and they use it, indiscriminately. उसके बाद पानी जाता है बाकी जगह.
But so the kind of advantage we have over Pakistan, that is the same kind of advantage China has over us.
Yes.
Will they use that advantage?
Well,
in the recent past, we have seen that what ISI has been doing is that they're shifting the militancy south of Pir Panjal to areas like Rajouri and Doda. Is this a deliberate move by the Pakistani army and the ISI? Because these are the places where we are building our new dams.
But I think they would be re-strategizing something, and it is here I think that we need to be alert to what the Pakistanis are doing.
इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी एक ऐसा टर्म जो आज हर भारतीय को पता है और शायद हर पाकिस्तानी को भी, पर ये क्यों है? क्यों इस टर्म के बारे में आज इतनी ज़्यादा बात हो रही है? क्यों इस टर्म को आज इतना ज़्यादा यूज़ किया जा रहा है? उसका रीज़न है कि ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के वक्त हमने एज इन भारत ने इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी को अबेयंस में डाल दिया, मतलब एक होल्ड पे डाल दिया। पर इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी का इतिहास क्या है? क्यों भारत और पाकिस्तान के बीच में ये ट्रीटी साइन की गई थी और इससे दोनों ही देशों को क्या बेनिफिट्स मिलते थे? आज के पॉडकास्ट में आपको ये सब कुछ जानने मिलेगा। इनफैक्ट इसका फ्यूचर भी जानने मिलेगा, क्योंकि हमारे जो गेस्ट है उनका कहना है कि पाकिस्तान अगर टूटता है, अगर बिखरता है, तो वो और किसी रीजन से नहीं, पानी की वजह से बिखरेगा। पर ऐसा वो क्यों कहते हैं, वो जानने के लिए तो आपको ये पूरा पॉडकास्ट देखना पड़ेगा। बट हु इज द गेस्ट ऑन टुडेज पॉडकास्ट? It is Mr. Uttam Kumar Sinha. Uttam Kumar Sinha is a leading commentator on transboundary water issues, especially Indus Waters Treaty. और इस सब्जेक्ट पे उन्होंने 2 पुस्तकें भी लिखी है. In this podcast, you will get to know everything about Indus Waters Treaty, right from how it was signed, who brokered it, and what is the future of this treaty now. This is an in-depth academic podcast just for those people who are absolutely interested in Indus Waters Treaty. So watch it till the end and make sure that you take notes from this podcast, because इस podcast पे आपको बहुत सारी ऐसी चीज़ें जानने मिलेगी जो आज तक पब्लिक डोमेन में किसी के पास अवेलेबल नहीं थी. So without any further ado, let's start this podcast in 3, 2, 1. उत्तम सर, आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत है इस पॉडकास्ट पे। बहुत सारी चीज़ें हैं जिनके ऊपर आपके साथ में बात करनी है, एंड योर समवन जिन्होंने एक बहुत स्पेसिफिक चीज़ के बारे में 2 किताबें लिखी है, एंड आजकल जो इंडिया पाकिस्तान के बीच में सारे कॉन्वर्सेशंस हो रहे हैं वो इसी चीज़ को लेकर हो रहे हैं, जो कि है इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी, एंड उसके ऊपर बात करेंगे. बट सर, फर्स्टली वेलकम ऑन द पॉडकास्ट.
थैंक यू वेरी मच, धन्यवाद. लुकिंग फॉरवर्ड.
सर, जो आपकी पहली किताब थी इंडस बेसिन अनइंटरप्टेड, एंड देन उसके बाद में जो सेकंड बुक थी ट्रायल बाय वाटर, बोथ ऑफ दीज बुक्स डील विद समथिंग जिसके बारे में आज कॉन्वर्सेशंस बहुत ज्यादा बढ़ चुके हैं. एंड ये दोनों ही बुक्स शायद आपने उस टाइम पे लिखी थी जब इतना ज्यादा इसके बारे में कोई बात नहीं कर रहा था. टेल मी फर्स्टली कि एग्जैक्टली ये प्रॉब्लम क्या है इंडस वाटर्स ट्रीटी का, एंड व्हाई इज इट सच अ डेलिकेट प्रॉब्लम टू डील विद.
आपने सही बोला, डेलिकेट प्रॉब्लम. इट इज अ डेलिकेट प्रॉब्लम बिकॉज इट इज अ मैटर ऑफ वाटर. एंड पानी एक ऐसी चीज है कि सबको जरूरत है. In fact, it becomes part of everything that you do. Whether you're talking about energy issues, whether you're talking about irrigation and food security, water is the principal component. Also because water doesn't have any substitute. So आपको इस issue को deal करना है. You cannot discover water like you discover oil.
Right.
We have the same amount of water when the earth was created as it is now. You have to learn to deal with it. And that is the beauty of what water is. You have to manage it efficiently. You have to manage it carefully. But in international relations, जहाँ पे boundaries हैं and state formations हैं, वहाँ पे you have to also share the water. And sharing the water then becomes a complex issue. Because it is a political issue. It is an emotive issue. And it is a divisive issue. So it becomes very much part of the state relationship. यदि आप साउथ एशिया का मैप देखें, and we tend to forget geography, we also tend to ignore history, and I always say कि both the two have to be looked together. तो आप यदि हमारा भूगोल देखेंगे साउथ एशिया का, it's so intricately tied with rivers. Each state has a river coming in and flowing out. And India का आप position देखेंगे, it's very central to all the rivers that are crisscrossing the region. Therefore, in the regional context, rivers become very important, both in terms of livelihood issues, in terms of economic returns, in terms of agricultural production, but also in terms of a healthy relationship with your neighboring countries. So the moment 1947 happened, when the land was partitioned, when Pakistan came into existence, the rivers became a very important part of the relationship, and it was quite natural.
Right.
पहले क्या था कि इंडस बेसिन के बारे में जो बात करते हैं, it's one of the largest basins in the world. In fact, at one particular point of time before 1947, it irrigated the largest number of agricultural field in any part of the world. In fact, even America had the lesser irrigated fields than the Indus Basin. So the value of that basin was immense, and the British had invested a lot in the canal systems. Engineering जो breakthroughs होते थे, civil engineering breakthroughs होते थे, those were all done by building these canals. So it was a trendsetter, the Indus Basin and the canals, and the link canals that came about. They were trendsetters. They set up a whole civil engineering outlook to irrigation. So 47 जब हुआ, it was very valuable. The basin was one, but then we partitioned the boundary. So the basin had to be divided. If the land was divided, the river system also needed to be divided. And that's how started the whole emphasis on how should India and Pakistan deal with this very complex, integrated, and very valuable river system.
But so फिर when we knew that जो एक population है जो इंडस बेसिन के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है, the majority population lived in the Indian borders, inside the Indian borders, then why did we give 80% of that water to Pakistan? I mean, what was the logic at that time?
Well, ये जो 80% and 20% का जो हम लोग अक्सर बात करते हैं, if you look at it from a more factual account of things, and in my book, I mean, this is the book which just came out last year, this, and it created a bit of a news because the timing was such. I had not expected the treaty to go in abeyance, but I had expected that something would happen because being part of the government, we do give inputs and suggestions. Anyway, so this 80-20 का जो generally हम लोग बात करते हैं कि India gave away 80% of water. यदि आप negotiations देखेंगे, and if you look at the factual details of the treaty, there is no mention actually of the 80-20. 80-20 was never the part of negotiation. See, negotiation happened at various levels and at various stages. 8 years negotiation tha. So the first phase of negotiation was, despite India and Pakistan now being two sovereign states, both would cooperate and create what is called a more joint management of the rivers.
Right.
एक jointness के बारे में बात हुई थी कि हम लोग डेवलप करेंगे in terms of irrigation, in terms of electricity production वगैरह वगैरह. But the politics was never right for any joint development. So वो phase खत्म हो गया. The second phase came as to then what should be done with the rivers. So it was identified basin में कि which are the principal rivers. तो आइडेंटिफिकेशन में क्या हुआ, द वेस्टर्न रिवर्स आ गए, उसमें इंडस मेन रिवर, झेलम एंड चेनाब को आइडेंटिफाई किया बेस्ड ऑन देयर एनुअल एवरेज वाटर फ्लोस, राइट. And then Punjab ki jo rivers se, because remember the boundary division was all about Punjab division. So there was one Punjab which became two Punjabs.
Right.
So the West Punjab and the East Punjab. Now West Punjab mein the canal systems existed, right? So the Pakistanis obviously needed waters of the eastern rivers. हमारे side में rivers के headworks थे, but less irrigated land था. वहाँ पे headworks नहीं थे, but they were more irrigated land. So obviously Pakistan became the lesser player, and therefore the negotiation then at that stage became eastern rivers.
Okay.
It was all about eastern rivers. That means Sutlej, Ravi, and Beas. Right? These were the three eastern rivers. इंडिया सेट कि भाई यदि हम ईस्टर्न रिवर्स को डिस्ट्रीब्यूट कर देंगे तो हम लोग क्या करेंगे, बिकॉज वी नीडेड टू इरिगेट आवर लैंड, राइट. भाखड़ा नंगल डैम बन रही थी. वी हैड प्लान्स टू बिल्ड द राजस्थान कैनाल व्हिच इवेंचुअली बिकेम द इंदिरा गांधी कैनाल. वी हैड थॉट अबाउट सेवरल थिंग्स ऑन द ईस्टर्न रिवर्स. सो आवर नेगोशिएटर्स, बाय द वे, दे वर सिविल इंजीनियर्स. इस ट्रीटी की खूबी ये है कि ये कोई डिप्लोमेट ने नहीं नेगोशिएट किया था. दे वर इंजीनियर्स. सो देयरफॉर द इंजीनियर्स थॉट फ्रॉम अ वेरी डिफरेंट पर्सपेक्टिव. अक्सर लोग हमसे पूछते हैं कि यदि डिप्लोमेट होता तो क्या होता इस नेगोशिएशन में. मैं बोलता ये नेगोशिएशन चलते जाता और घिस के खत्म हो जाता विदाउट अ ट्रीटी बीइंग साइंड. बट हियर यू डीलिंग विद एन इंजीनियरिंग पर्सपेक्टिव, एंड इंजीनियर्स बाय एंड लार्ज सर्च फॉर सॉल्यूशंस, and in searching for solutions they undermine politics, if that may be so. This is not to say that they were not nationalist. Our engineers protected our interest, India's interest, on the eastern rivers. So it was not so much about 80% पानी हम उनको दे दिए और 20% हम लोग. It was about your interest on the rivers at that point of time for India and India's requirement. It was the eastern rivers that mattered. Eastern rivers का flow was about 32 to 33 million acre feet of water annually. Western rivers का flow कितना था? About 135 million acre feet of water. So for an aam janta, if I look at these figures, eastern rivers 33 to 34 and western rivers 135, I will say, अरे ये तो गजब हो गया. हमने वेस्टर्न रिवर्स दे दिया इतना सारा पानी और हम लोग सिर्फ 33 million acre feet of water we kept for ourselves. So therefore the 80-20 comes into equation. But remember, जो 135 million acre feet of water western rivers पे हैं, उसका जो इंडस का कंपोनेंट है, it's about 90 to 95.
Okay.
Indus waters तो हम लोग यूज कर ही नहीं पाते हैं because of the difficult terrain. And because then it enters into, you know, what is called the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. So तो उनकी नदी हो गई. हम लोग अपने जो एरिया में तो यूज कर नहीं सकते हैं ज्यादा. We were only left with Jhelum and Chenab.
Right.
And they are about 20 to 23 and 25 to 28. So if you combine Jhelum and Chenab, it comes to about 48 million acre feet of water. And the eastern rivers were 33 million acre feet of water. अब आप mathematics कीजिए.
Correct, yeah.
So the Chenab and the Jhelum River at 48 million acre feet was still very difficult to harness at that point of time. Could you have immediately built the dams?
No.
Very difficult. Terrains were there. Eastern rivers were easy. Why? Because they were flat plain rivers. You could actually do the civil engineering interventions. So now it makes sense.
Yeah.
Why our engineers focused on the eastern rivers. So it was not so much about volume. It was about the rivers you had control over.
But then, did Nehru have a vision of using this water generosity over, let's say, the political piece of that thing? And the engineers, they clashed over with him?
Well, I think the engineers were left the task to come to a general agreement on the Indus Waters Treaty. The engineers were given the task to eventually come to an agreement, which after 8 years of negotiation, they did in 1960. The engineers were very much interested in the eastern rivers, as I said, and they wanted to protect India's interests. And therefore, the eastern rivers was full and exclusive use for India. Right? Now, there was also a larger political objective, which you can say the Prime Minister Nehru's objective. Prime Minister Nehru's objective, we know, was principally to come to some sort of peaceful coexistence with Pakistan. He, for long, felt, soon after 1947, that Pakistan was a pain in the wrong place, to be very frank. He would often get frustrated with Pakistan because of their behavior, because they would go around the world telling that India is the villain, that India is the aggressive state, etc. And for Nehru, I think image was a very important, the whole idea about India being bashed around was very important for him. Obviously, because India also required a lot of foreign assistance, aid, etc. So the image of India was very dear to him. And he, for long, felt that this issue of the water was getting a little tensed, and that India should come to some sort of reasonable agreement with Pakistan. That was his desire, his wish. He thought by signing this treaty, there would be some peaceful coexistence. Of course, he did not believe in Pakistan. I mean, everyone knows what the element of Pakistan is all about. The history clearly suggests, the partition history clearly suggests that Nehru knew what Pakistan leadership is all about. But there was a political objective of reaching some sort of understanding so that there would be peaceful coexistence and that both the countries would move on. India had a lot of other things to do, other things to achieve. It didn't want to get caught in this Pakistan's quagmire. And I think that was the political objective, to search for peace and coexistence. The technical objective was to retain our interest on the eastern rivers. So these were the two objectives, I think. I think we were successful on the eastern rivers. Our political objectives was not fulfilled because soon after the treaty was signed, Field Marshal Ayub Khan, the president of Pakistan, was claiming the territories of Kashmir and giving away land to China. So obviously, one can argue that Nehru's vision of peaceful coexistence failed. And I think he recounts it himself. He recounts it himself that, and he tells this in the parliament that, actually we purchased peace. We bought peace from Pakistan to have some peace, but we are where we were, he says to the chief negotiator. So he was quite distressed. And he became further distressed when in 1962, China attacked India.
But what is the reason behind, I read in your book that he was aggressively uncompromising when it came to East Pakistan, where there was Farakka barrage, and while we come to the western borders, he was a bit okay over there. What is the reason behind this?
Well, the reason was simply because there was an experience of partition. It was more visible. There was so much of attention going on. There was a Western influence. There were leadership who were interested in seeing India and Pakistan reach some sort of agreement. World Bank had thought about investing over $1 billion in that region. So there was a lot of interest and there was a lot of attention. And therefore, our whole policy process was geared more towards the western side of Pakistan. The eastern part of Pakistan, with the Ganga Basin and various other development that was happening, I think had a lack of foresight. The Farakka barrage had been raised even at that point of time. How should we distribute the waters on the Ganga with East Pakistan at that point of time? The idea of the Farakka barrage was a very important infrastructure for us. And I think Nehru was very clear that we should build this barrage because of several reasons. And one of the reasons was to protect the Calcutta port at that point of time from getting silted. So that was the whole idea. I won't say he was aggressive there, but I would say that he was uncompromising on that side. But here on the western side, because of several aspects which I just said, that also included Western pressure. He was willing to talk and negotiate.
Right.
I think that was the whole understanding of Nehru. Remember, the Damodar Valley project had already started at that point of time. So, and also I would say, even from the Pakistan perspective, there's so much of attention on the Indus Basin, and there was very little attention on the East Pakistan. By the way, the Pakistani leadership would never pay attention to East Pakistan anyway, the way they would pay attention to their side of the country.
Right.
So I think that was why the difference was. I think there were a lot of times when it was raised in the United Nations as well, on the eastern side, but I think we were quite clear that we were not at that point of our talk about the Ganga, because we had our own development plans. We were willing to talk on the Indus Basin.
Right. But can you also explain this to me, that why was there no exit clause planned inside this treaty, in this treaty? Was there any specific reason for her?
That comes as a surprise to me as to why there was actually no exit clause.
So was that a mistake?
Well, I would say that it was overlooked, I think, but with good intention.
Which is?
That I think the engineers, as I said, were of a different creed. If there was a diplomat, he was certainly had a timeline period, was saying that, okay, after 15 years, we would talk about, revising the treaty, right? But I said, engineer, you end up finding solutions. And they understood that the politics between India and Pakistan would never be good enough for the treaty to last. So the moment the two countries find an excuse, they would break the treaty. And therefore, he deliberately, I think, and quite intentionally, the engineers inserted this clause of no exit. That means both the countries are bound in the treaty. There's a very popular expression that was used, locked into each other's intestine.
Right.
Right. So they locked the treaty into the two countries, because I think the engineers knew that if there was a revision, India and Pakistan both would have immediately gone, and that would have happened immediately after 5 years. 1965, the war had happened. And that is why when we say that the treaty lasted, it is simply because of this insertion clause, no exit clause. You can mutually discuss what you want to do with the treaty. You can revise it, upgrade it, update it, but you can't pull out of it unless you both agree to it.
Okay.
Mutually agree to it.
But then what happened in the recent past when we put the treaty on abeyance? So how did that happen when there is a no exit clause versus now we have it on abeyance? So what is this exactly?
So I think we're going a little away from the text of the treaty, and we're looking at the spirit of the relationship. And the spirit of the relationship between India and Pakistan is completely on a downslide. And it has been on a downslide for a long time. So I think this instrument, this treaty, becomes part of the relationship of two countries. And as they say, it takes two to make the treaty, but it also takes two to keep the treaty alive. And I think it's very important, I think, at this stage for India to relook at this treaty. We have talked about, what is called revisiting the treaty. We have talked about re-looking at the treaty with Pakistan, but it has fallen to deaf ears. Because I think Pakistan clearly feels that if they're going to renegotiate the treaty, they will not get what they got earlier.
Right.
So, so they don't talk about renegotiating, they talk about sticking to the treaty. But I think Pahalgam tilted the whole impression, as you know. And I think the treaty has now become an instrument of action for India, right? It's become a leverage, because given our geography of an upper riparian, I think we're now using the treaty in terms of signaling Pakistan that their behavior is not correct and that India would take necessary step to deal with its own security issue. So what has happened, the treaty is now linked to the security of India, right? It was never done earlier. There were wars we fought, yet the treaty existed. But I think this time the government has thought otherwise. They've used this treaty as an instrument of punishment, maybe, a leverage of coercive action with Pakistan. But we've used the word very carefully. We have not said abrogate the treaty. We have said put it in abeyance. And therefore, there is a clear path that India has. We have not abrogated it. So when country says, why have you? We said, no, the treaty is still alive. Right? We are only doing certain things that the treaty provides us to do.
Right.
On the western rivers, because we have completed most of our task on the eastern rivers. So it's now the western rivers. During the time of the negotiation, it was so much the eastern rivers. But now it's so much the western rivers. And I think in abeyance, what has happened is India has got unilateral right to do what it wants. And therefore, I think this abeyance will last for another 10 to 12 years. India is in no hurry to say that, come and talk. And I don't think Pakistan can give us any assurance that we won't indulge in cross-border terrorism.
Right.
And even if they do, how do you believe them? Right? So therefore, in some sense or the other, the abeyance will continue till the time I think India builds its structures on the western rivers, which it is going full force. And these structures to come up will take about 10 years. But remember, these are not out of the provisions. These are very much part of what the treaty outlines you to do. So India is following the provisions of the treaty, but it is doing it unilaterally. That means there's no consultation with the Pakistanis. They're not telling them what they're doing. There's no visit of the Pakistanis to the site, which was earlier done. So you can see how the treaty has changed its color, right? The text remains, but the spirit has been thrown out. And that's because what happened in Pahalgam last year in April 2025.
But sir, you mentioned that we didn't use the western rivers because of the terrain and also because we didn't have the right infrastructure
In the early period.
in the early periods. But why didn't we fast track those infrastructure building projects in the years since then? Why did it take us so many years to actually realize our mistakes?
Yeah, you're right, because the provisions and ये भी एक negotiation का खूबी ये है जब हम लोग बोलते हैं कि भाई हम लोग पाकिस्तान को बहुत दे दिए and we did not retain our interest. I think factually again one has to explain this. Eastern rivers 100%. On the western rivers we said Pakistan can have 100% of the flow of water after India uses some of the provisions. So we tend to miss that element. तो हमारे engineers वहाँ भी बड़े खूबी से उनको थोड़ा सा घुमा के वहां भी अपना प्रोविजंस ले लिए. Provisions क्या था? 3.6 million acre feet of water that India can store. Each river has on the western river a certain amount of water you can store. Then there's a certain amount of water you can use for irrigation. You can build as many hydroelectricity plant as you can, provided they are run of the river. So provisions to the. We, of course, did not immediately start because of the reasons I said. Capabilities nahi the, paisa, it requires huge investment. So we actually started it around 75, 76. We thought about some big projects like the Salal Dam, for example. So the moment, India started looking at these rivers to build projects, that's where Pakistani, I think, would play the dirty game. And that is what happens when the spirit is very important of the treaty. You break that spirit, right? They started misusing the provisions of the treaty by continuously, trying to stop the projects because there was a political objective by doing it. To have projects in Kashmir would obviously mean their entire vision of an independent or a Kashmir to Pakistan would go away. They wanted to always create disturbances. They did not want Kashmir to progress. So any action, any project, any development initiative by the government on the rivers in Kashmir through the treaty was used by Pakistan. At that point of time, we did not have probably the diplomatic strength or the military strength or the leadership strength to say, no, you cannot do it. It has taken many years for us, many decades eventually, before, this government has eventually said, no, we'll put the treaty in abeyance.
But has the treaty acted as an economic chokehold on North India? Because there was this one number which I found out, estimatedly the restrictive provisions of IWT, it costed Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh over $506 million annually. So did the treaty actually act like a economic chokehold?
Well, this report, I think, is done by some Danish company which made some calculations about if the western rivers water would have been developed in a certain manner and in a timely way, then the gains in Jammu and Kashmir would have been quite large. And that it did not happen, therefore, this kind of loss figure was given. There are two things here, I think, and the Kashmiris feel very passionate about that the Indus Waters was a treaty signed between India and Pakistan and there was nothing for Jammu and Kashmir. True, historically, I think there was so much of attention on Punjab and the eastern rivers that the western rivers were quite overlooked. The Punjab civil engineers were very influential in the policy circle. The Punjab politicians were very influential in the circle. From Jammu and Kashmir, we had no voice at that point of time. Sheikh Abdullah was most of the time in prison.
Yeah.
Right. So, and the relationship with Sheikh Abdullah and Nehru, was fluctuating all the time.
It was a seesaw relation.
Yes. So you didn't have what is called a Kashmiri perspective or a Kashmiri voice, at that point of time. And I believe, and it's written in the book, that if there was a powerful voice and a powerful leader who said, no, come on, I need to also be part of this whole process and see what gain is for us, then maybe the whole, text of the treaty might have been slightly different.
Right.
So I think the engineers were in a bit of a blind alley when it came to Kashmir because they were so focused on the eastern rivers, and because they got 100% of the water rights on the eastern rivers, they had to concede the western rivers. But as I said, and this is where I think the Kashmiri perspective is wrong, the treaty is not wrong on Kashmir because the provisions are there. You can build as many hydroelectricity power plants provided they run of the river. You can store 3.6 million acre feet of water. You can irrigate a vast amount of land. It's all written there. So there's nothing wrong in the text. What has happened is that India, rather the center, New Delhi, didn't take, sort of desired results to Jammu and Kashmir to develop those rivers. And I think, therefore, the complaint comes from Kashmir that nothing much has happened on the rivers. It is only this government now, in the last 10 years, which has focused on larger infrastructure development in Jammu and Kashmir, which also includes, infrastructures on the rivers, in particular Chenab and Jhelum.
But did we have enough resources at that time to build those?
There was a lot of factors. I think technical assessment was required, financial crunch to hamesha tha. These were not small projects. You were talking about brick projects.
Right.
So there were issues. There were difficult times when there were liabilities. But I think the Kashmiris would probably feel other way that India did not focus on the Kashmiri people because these were Kashmiri rivers and I think they should have had the first right. But I feel the provisions are there. It's just that the provisions never got utilized and now it is being utilized. Yeah.
And so when we talk about Pakistan, now Pakistan is again facing water crisis, and if I'm not mistaken, it has gone from 5,000 to 1,000 cubic meters per capita. What are the reasons behind this? Is it the kind of allegedly the manipulation that India does, or is it completely Pakistan's fault?
No, manipulation of India is just a story which Pakistan gives,
of course,
and we know that very well. Much has to do with their own water management. And I think World Bank figures and many other institutional figures quite clearly suggest that Pakistan has one of the worst water management policies in the world. So they need to look into their house and, get things in order. That's one. There are also inter-provincial rivalry in Pakistan, which are very deeply embedded.
Okay.
Right. Pakistan is all about Punjab centric. It's all Punjab centric. वो cricket भी खेलते हैं तो उनका जो boss होगा पंजाबी होगा. The irrigated waters first go to the Punjabi fields. The most prominent generals in the Pakistan armies are from Punjab. So it's all Punjabi, right? So they are the first users of water as the eastern rivers goes into Punjab. They're the first user, and they use it, indiscriminately. उसके बाद पानी जाता है बाकी जगह. Sindh, Balochistan, वगैरह. So the issue is more inter-provincial. There, the issue is more about poor water management, right? But of course, it politically suits them to always blame India for all the misfortune that happens in Pakistan. It is their strategy. It is their tool. And it is a very useful tool for them because what it does is it distracts the establishment from taking responsibility. It creates a kind of a fake narrative amongst the general, आम जनता, saying कि भाई वो उधर देखो इंडिया यही कर रहा है तुम्हारा. तो ये सूट करता है for the regime to continue to survive, but it also suits them internationally to constantly blame India for all the worries and all the problems that is happening in Pakistan. It helps them. They get a lot of fund. तुरंत पैसे आने लग जाते हैं. तो अभी जैसे ऑपरेशन सिंदूर के बाद some calculation has been done. I'm not sure how authentic it is, but पानी नहीं आ रहा है, बोल रहे हैं ना, अक्सर बोलते रहते हैं इनके मीडिया में कि 20% पानी कम हो गया है वगैरह वगैरह. With that, they managed to get substantial amount of aid and grants from foreign donors and institutions. So it helps them. I think this is all a political narrative which they have built up. But the worrisome issue is for me that if at all Pakistan breaks apart, it is going to be through the water issues and not through anything else.
Okay.
You know, जहाँ पानी नहीं मिलेगा सिंध को, बलूचिस्तान को, you see the whole, it will all ferment, great resentment with what Punjab is doing. So water itself will, Pakistan will implode because of the water issues, not because of India's doing, largely because of their own doing.
Right. So is it true that 64% of Pakistan's river water has been evaporated and it's getting depleted because of unlined canals?
Yeah, it is true. Some of the canal systems which was built by the British and which they have built also has added to a lot of water worries. But there are solutions to it. You see, many of the projects that Pakistan started after the treaty was signed, a lot of money came to Pakistan to build the storage infrastructures, to build link canals from the western rivers to the eastern rivers. Most of these projects were not done in a proper manner. Corruption is one of the issues in Pakistan. So they need to get their projects in order now. Storage capacity is also very important to them.
Right.
Remember, Pakistan can never get dry unless they manage it poorly. See, if you look at the Indus Basin watershed, 60% and above is with Pakistan. So watershed is not just about the visible rivers you see. It is also about tributaries, the lakes, the swamps, the underground water. It's the catchment area of water that is important. And you can always draw water from the catchment area if you have a proper management policy, a groundwater policy, and also how you sort of intervene engineeringly into these catchment areas.
Okay.
Storage is very important for Pakistan, and I think they're going to move forward by building more storage capacity so that it takes care of times when the water is less, or when India has to release water during flood season, they can capture it in that storage infrastructures.
I think this started with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1957. From there onwards, they started claiming this victimhood.
Yes, very much.
Okay.
And Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was a very clever man, Oxford trained. He could speak very, crisp English. He could captivate the audience, just like Zafarullah Khan, the first foreign minister of Pakistan. And I write in my book that in 1952, when this whole water issue was building up, the same complaint that Pakistan had then as they have now, that India is stopping water, India is going to go make us dry. So Zafarullah Khan goes to the United Nations Security Council and makes a very powerful speech. And it is recorded there that many of the people are moved and they have tears in their eyes. So the Pakistani diplomats, politicians are very used to creating this kind of impression globally. Remember, there's always a global attention to the underdogs. They always make themselves out to be victims,
Right.
underdogs. They create an impression. Western countries, you know how they are and how they think. For the Western countries, India should never become larger than life sort of power in the region. So they always play this game with smaller countries like Pakistan, Nepal, and Bangladesh. So there's a larger Western political objective also in this. So you're right. Bhutto was, by the way, the Minister of Water Resources under Ayub Khan. And Bhutto goes to the United Nations General Assembly in 1958.
Yeah.
And the negotiations are still going on. And I think it is for the first time, and very cleverly, Bhutto says, when there is this resolution, a draft resolution on what defines aggression. And the Soviet Union has presented its draft resolution, what constitutes aggression. And Bhutto makes a statement by saying that irrigation water, you see, he links water to irrigation, which means food. He says, stopping irrigation water is also an act of aggression. It's also an act of economic aggression. And this is the first time diplomatically that Bhutto has linked water to aggression. So the Pakistanis have played this victimhood very well. Their political leaders have articulated their lower riparian position vis-a-vis India very effectively, and their diplomats are well trained and well oiled in claiming that all the problems in Pakistan is because of India's doing.
Okay.
Yeah.
When this was going on and Pakistan was claiming this victimhood, and now when we have put the treaty on abeyance, isn't it easier for them to claim this and to prove this, that we are a victim of something like this?
So we made it also very clear. We were earlier not very clear in our position on the Indus Waters Treaty. We allowed it to keep functioning. The Permanent Indus Commission kept meeting despite our difficult relationship, despite animosity, despite the wars, despite 2001 Parliament attack, despite 2008 Mumbai attack. The treaty functioned. One can argue as to why it did or why it should not have. That's a different matter. But I think now we were very clear in this particular government, the NDA government led by Prime Minister Modi, that to deal with Pakistan, we have to use several leverages, right? And I think in that, the Indus Waters Treaty became an important leverage. What we have done now is, we haven't just blindly put the treaty in abeyance. It was because of a result of something. It was because of Pahalgam.
Of course.
And the post-Pahalgam reaction. So I think we've been very clear to link this to cross-border terrorism. Right? And cross-border terrorism is an important theme in the international context. Everyone talks about it. Whether it's American or the European power, they all think about cross-border terrorism as a malice. Right? And I think that our emphasis on cross-border terrorism, I think, is a defining feature. Right? And it is because of that we have taken a certain policy approach to put the treaty in abeyance. And then we clarified by saying that it is not abrogated, it is in abeyance. So at a point of time, we might sit and talk about the future of the treaty, right? Provided we give evidences, that Pakistan give evidence that they have sort of, stopped cross-border terrorism. Now that's unlikely to happen. And it's also unlikely for us to accept anything that Pakistan says. So I think it's clever, smart, it's nuanced, and it's done in a certain ambiguous way that keeps the treaty. I mean, you can say that the treaty is in coma, and this coma will go on for a long time.
Okay.
Right?
Provided we build the infrastructure which is needed.
So that is the objective as well.
Yeah.
So now there's going to be no a permanent Indus Commission dialogue, which we had as the treaty existed. There's going to be no discussion on our projects. So all that has stopped. And therefore we are now unilateral in doing what we want to do on the Western rivers, but we are doing all the things that are written under the provisions.
Okay.
So it makes it a little ambiguous, nuanced, but very smart.
Okay. But so the kind of advantage we have over Pakistan, that is the same kind of advantage China has over us.
Yes.
Will they use that advantage?
Well, we shouldn't be too worried about China.
Why is that?
We should be concerned as to what China is doing, but I don't think we should be too worried.
Okay.
And this is how you understand, as I said, the geography of South Asia. Now, we are upper riparian with Pakistan. As you know, we have the headworks on our side. And upper riparians can be effective in the sense they can control water, they can manipulate water, they can create the infrastructure to stop the flow and allow the flow, etc., etc. It can be done engineeringly, however difficult the terrain might be. If there is a thought process, you can do it. You can use water as a leverage. China, if you look at its entire geography, is more amenable to using water as a leverage than probably India has been in its dealing with its neighbor. Very clear. We are a different country. Peaceful coexistence, we call it generosity. I mean, practical generosity, calculated generosity. We've done treaty with Bangladesh, we've done treaty with Pakistan, we've had treaties with Nepal, we have fruitful cooperation with Bhutan as well. So I think we are in a different mindset and in a different mind space. Our diplomacy works quite differently in this region. China shares rivers with, I think, 14 countries. It's an upper riparian country. It's a powerful upper riparian country. It distributes water and does not receive too much of water. So that makes it geographically very advantageous in dealing with countries. With India, it has the Brahmaputra and a certain portion of the Indus, also flows from Tibet before it enters India. And a certain part of Sutlej also originates from the Tibetan plateau. But it's the Brahmaputra that is of great concerns to us. It's an important river of the northeast. Why I said we should not be too worried is the fact that much of the water in terms of the precipitation is received on our side of the boundary, right? So if the length of the Brahmaputra is about 2,800 kilometers, of that 1,600 kilometer flows through the Tibetan plateau before it turns into India. And I think about 800 kilometers flows in India before the rest flows in Bangladesh. Right. Now, if you look at the length, one would say, oh my God, 1,600 is the length that is on that side, therefore there would be more water. But because of the topography and the rainfall pattern and all that stuff, the length does not directly correspond to the volume of the water. So there is much less water on the Tibetan side than it is on our side. So therefore we are richly endowed with the precipitation factor. So therefore the worry is lesser. We have several tributaries, water flowing tributaries, Dibang, the Lohit, the Siang. All these rivers are important rivers in Arunachal Pradesh. And as the Yarlung enters, these rivers join the Yarlung and then it becomes the Brahmaputra.
Right.
So again, I mean, we have rivers on our side and there is plenty of water on our side. Therefore, the idea of that China would make us run dry does not really hold true, speaking hydrologically. So we should not be too worried about it. We should be concerned on the following points. That A, China is a neighbor, like Pakistan is a neighbor to us. There has to be some mechanism that we need to evolve, right? Because China is building dams like we are building dams in the western rivers, right? We should have some information as to what Chinese are doing, right? Like Pakistan has, been always saying that we should have information on what India is doing, and therefore we signed this treaty. Of course, we're not expecting that China should sign a treaty.
Yeah.
China does not believe in treaties. It believes in some dialogue process or some very shallow memorandum of understanding that we have with China anyway. But again, China stops it from, giving us hydrological data. So I think our concern should be to have a institutional mechanism with China, because it is a neighboring country, right?
But should it be one-on-one or should we include the other 14 countries?
Well, China would not like other countries to come in. Obviously, they would like to deal one-on-one, and we should deal one-on-one with China. I think we are big enough a country to deal with China on a one-to-one rather than carry small countries along with us to show strength. I mean, that's not the best way to deal with China. We are a low riparian country, that we must realize. But I think it is a good idea to have an institutional mechanism. We have an institutional mechanism of the memorandum of understanding. We need to advance that, enhance that, bring in some more elements to it, and build this healthy sort of water cooperation with China. They're building the dam, which is just about 30 kilometers away from the Arunachal border, which we are watching, observing. We would expect China as a responsible power to let us know what these dams are about. Also to share data with us in the period that is required. The worry for us would be that would China deliberately use these structures to hurt us, to punish us? And that is a worry. But that is where diplomacy comes in. I think a healthy relationship will always welcome. There is a thaw in India and China relationship. And I think this thaw should give us some space to talk on this, on the water issues and what China is doing on their side of the Brahmaputra, which they call Yarlung. So I think the two countries need to sit together and have a water dialogue. I think water and rivers should become part of the core dialogue process between India and China. Not just the boundaries, but also water issues.
Yeah.
But on your issue of other countries coming in, I think India can also have another kind of arrangement on the Brahmaputra, because you have Bhutan, you have Bangladesh.
Yeah.
I think we can have our own sub-regional context to it.
Okay.
So at one level, India and China talk about various issues. But at another level, we can also talk about Bhutan, Bangladesh and India coming together in a sub-regional context, in a sub-regional group. We have BIMSTEC and all, but we can effectively use river issues, water issues and bring it as an important aspect of the relationship as well.
Right.
You can also think about extending it beyond this region to the Mekong. And we have this cooperation called the Ganga Mekong Cooperation, which was done in 2002 in Vajpayee's government to learn how to manage these basins. And so these are useful elements, I think, that builds relationship. And water is going to be an important component of building relationship. It can be also something that can destroy the relationship as well. So we need to think carefully on it.
Of course. So I don't know if this is connected or not, but when we actually accepted Tibet being part of China, do you think that was a mistake of some kind at that point of time when we knew that the kind of rivers that flow through Tibet? Should we have done it?
Well, first of all, 1940, it was British India that, negotiated with the Tibetan Authority to sign the McMahon Line during the Shimla Convention. So it was the British India. After that, well, there are certain mistakes or follies. I think it was lack of understanding, I would say.
Okay.
I think also, and I think this comes out in the book, that after signing, when the negotiation was on, Nehru went to China, met Mao, and I think he got carried away by Mao's sort of impression of India, China, Bhai Bhai, and the rise of Asian powers, etc., and how India and China could get together and counter this new imperialism of the Western powers. I think that impressed Nehru because he also was very much in that line of thinking. But I think he was misled to a great extent by Mao. Mao has no such feelings about India and China getting together. Mao was very clear that it was all about Chinese influence and Chinese power. And I think there were some fundamental errors in thinking, I think, that Nehru, one can really sort of pin it on him. But these are all retrospective thinking. It's always good to look back and blame certain things. But I think Nehru was also, I think, in midst of several issues. In fact, his whole Bandung conference, which came in 1956, was actually to bring China to the forefront of international attention. He felt that to keep China as a rogue and to treat China as a criminal or as a pariah would make China even more aggressive. So he was also thinking in terms of co-opting China, one can say appeasing China. And I think there were some errors in judgment, I think, at that point of time.
Right.
Yeah.
So one of the last things which I wanted to talk about was, in the recent past, we have seen that what ISI has been doing is that they're shifting the militancy south of Pir Panjal to areas like Rajouri and Doda. Is this a deliberate move by the Pakistani army and the ISI? Because these are the places where we are building our new dams. So is it to terrorize those places?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised that they would be recalculating their entire strategy. So the cross-border terrorism will be still alive, I think. And I think they would be planning several things on this count, because I think they know very clearly that the treaty is in abeyance and India is going to do several things, and they would be vulnerable from time to time, though not completely in the sense that they're talking about. But I think they would be re-strategizing something. And it is here, I think, that we need to be alert to what the Pakistanis are doing. Our monetary system, our security forces have to be on their toes all the time. The Pakistan is not going away,
of course,
and neither is cross-border terrorism.
Did you check out that one clip of, I think, Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist that was talking about that पानी को लेकर कुछ होने वाला है, ऐसी साल होने वाला है. They will use now water as वो क्या बोलते हैं, it's दहशत फैलाना, पानी को लेके. अक्सर उनके जो sentiments उभर के आते हैं पाकिस्तान साइड में, they are very very emotive and they have often said कि पानी के लेके हम लोग कुछ भी कर सकते हैं. बट डू यू थिंक कि जो अगला अटैक हो सकता है पाकिस्तान का, वो पानी के ही किसी इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे होगा?
पानी वुड बी एन एक्सक्यूज.
ओके,
आई मीन वो तो हमेशा करते आ रहे हैं.
राइट, टेरर अटैक तो वो करते ही आते हैं.
जब पानी बह भी रहा था, जब ट्रीटी एग्जिस्ट भी कर रही थी, तो वो टेरर तो चल ही रहा था,
बट कैन दे टारगेट द इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर?
Well, I think our these dams and all that are being built are not too far from the border. वो तो है, they can target it. It's not that they can't. But I think our we have shown during Operation Sindhu that our defense, air defense, is very strong and very capable to intercept these kind of missile attacks. But we have to keep it alert, advance our capability, because they will also be doing several things. So yeah, but more important would be how they will penetrate inside and then try to create damages. Then the overt way of doing operation will be the more covert way of creating fear, terror, and even damaging the infrastructures.
Right.
World War II में होता था ना, लोग जाते थे और डैम में बॉम्ब लगा के बर्स्ट कर देते थे. तो you have to be alert and always be watchful on these counts.
So one last thing, we have discussed everything, almost everything about Indus Waters Treaty, but what is the future now? How does this relationship between India and Pakistan look from here onwards, and what is going to happen in future with this treaty?
Well, I think the water would be now a core component of India-Pakistan relations. Any dialogue which will start, and I don't see this dialogue starting anytime soon, there might be some back channel approach. Water would be brought up front to talk about. We, I think in India, will stick to this line of the treaty in abeyance. We will constantly demand from Pakistan good behavior, which of course is not going to come, but we'll be constantly talking about cross-border terrorism. We will try to, in the next 7 to 8 years, see that our projects which we have lined up are put in place and that the benefits are accrued to the Kashmiri people. So that period of time, I think the abeyance will continue. Would Pakistan talk about a new treaty? I don't think so. I think they will also concentrate on their side of water management, building their own storage capacities. They will constantly use the treaty as part of the bilateral, sort of clamor that they do with India. They will use it as a typical PR exercise of saying that it is India that is to be blamed for all the problems of Pakistan.
Right.
The establishment, it suits the establishment also. So I think on both the counts, abeyance for India and for Pakistan, using this abeyance for their own survival, the establishment, I'm not talking about the people.
Of course.
I think we are also trying to create a difference here. I think the Prime Minister also said, there's several leaders who said about, it's the establishment that is the problem and not the people of Pakistan. So I think that there has to be some clarity on that. But I don't see that clarity in Pakistan. I think the establishment will continue to build this narrative of India the villain, India the perpetrator of violence, all that kind of thing that goes along in their diplomacy with India.
Yeah. But the end goal and the end probably tagline is that the treaty is going to stay in abeyance.
Will stay in abeyance, but I would think, and this is my personal account, that given the rivers in South Asia, and I'm going beyond politics now, given the rivers, these are mountain rivers flowing in, the glaciers are melting, there's going to be a period of time where these rivers will have a heavy flow of water. The flows will be continuously heavy now, especially on the Indus. You need to have some mechanism, some structures. Nato, it will be absolutely damaging for everyone. So there are issues of how we manage our rivers in South Asia, given the changes that are happening. And this goes beyond politics, I think, because it will be damaging for not only India and Pakistan, but the whole, Nepal, Bhutan, Bangladesh. What do we do with this? That is a question that will always disturb leaders. Of course, there's the politics of the relationship, but there's a larger natural factor that is being played out, and they will have to think collectively. I don't think any country can individually deal with this issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. You were very nice. Very easy you are.
Thank you
with
so
your
much, sir.
questions. And very knowledgeable.
Thank you so much, sir.
And you've read the books, which is so happy.
Yeah.
That I'm so happy that you have.
Thank you so much, sir. I would request the audience as well, please check out both the books, because I read the first book before this conversation actually started happening, and it was one of the most phenomenal book I've ever read, because This is the first time actually I read something about Indus,
Yeah.
and there was no book before
Well, I
this.
can show you the earlier book also.
Yes,
It's,
absolutely.
It's in a hardcover. It has come in paperback. This was 2021.
Yeah, this is the one I have.
And this is the more latest one,
Trial by water,
2025. So you can read both together,
Yes.
one after another.
Yeah, yeah. That is the, I think that should be the goal of everyone. But thank you so much, sir.
Lovely.
Perfect.